Her heart sank. She really wanted him not to be a psychopath, if for no other reason than she did not want to wake up with him sucking her blood. "You said earlier that everyone did it, but that you were cruel." "I was," Dracula said. "How about now?" He laughed, which did not ease her concerns. "Circumstances have changed. I don't impale anybody. I haven't for centuries. There hasn't been any need, and as I said, I only did it when necessary." "So that's all behind you? You did it because you thought you had to, but if you could go back you'd be less cruel and do things differently?" "Do things differently," he repeated, then, "Oh yes, absolutely." He looked straight into her eyes. "I'd be far crueler." Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It certainly has been a while since I last did a book review, and that is partly due to the fact that I've done a little bit of soul searching on it. Since I started doing these book reviews, I made the standard that I would not review anything that I didn't like, or that I didn't personally find amusing. And I feel that I personally set the bar a little bit too high and have done a disservice to others in the writing community. So from today, I'm going to be changing that. I'm going to be reviewing pretty much every book I read. I'm going to also be changing how I review the books. I'm going to review the story, the things I like, the things I didn't like, where I think things could be improved, if I think things can be improved, and personal things that I would like to see. I'm still going to try to be friendly about this because I understand that people's books are a little piece of their soul, and it can be a little difficult to hear criticism about it. That being said, I am going to be honest about it. If I review your book and you take umbrage with what I say, you are free to contact me about it. However, I will not apologize for my opinions. That's just to let you know a little bit of change in my policy. There will also be other videos coming. And I also want to make clear I'm not going to be taking requests for reviews anymore. I feel this has tainted my ability to be objective with the reviews that I have done. And I want to be objective mainly because I want the writing community to improve, and you can't learn if nobody tells you. So with all that being said, let's get right into today's review. Today we're reviewing Dracula's Guest by Amaya Tenshi. I originally caught this story on the Loin stream, which I highly advise everybody listen to. It's a fun little excuse to have somebody read a book to you and to comment on what you are hearing. It's also a good excuse to hear some truly good stories and some truly god-awful stuff. And it happens every Friday, roughly between 8:15 and 8:30 on Ian Kirkpatrick's channel, which I will link in the description. Also, please don't take my word and my reviews as gospel. Everybody's going to like different things, so I encourage you all to pick up your own copy of this book, and if you like it, leave me a review. If you've already read it and think I'm wrong, please let me know in the comment section. This book has been out for a little while, but like most authors and people who review books, I have a very long to-be-read list. So let's get right into the story. We start with our main character, Cammie, who is a college student in Seattle, Washington. She is concerned about her roommate, who appears to be getting thinner. This is an issue because her roommate is known to have a history with drugs. There is very little Cammie can do on this subject because they work opposite shifts. And it's during one of these shifts that Cammie gets a call from her parents, something she really isn't excited about. Cammie agrees to meet with them, but at a different coffee shop. She doesn't want her co-workers to meet her parents, and after the exchange, it is easy to see why. Cammie's mother is a bit of a Karen, and the discussion does not go very well, with Cammie eventually storming out of the store and heading home as it starts to rain. She receives a wonderful welcome when she arrives back at her apartment with all of her stuff being left on the curb. After not being able to get into the building and a quick phone call to the landlord, she is informed that they have been evicted. Cammy says this is impossible because she has been giving the money for the rent to her roommate. However, as it turns out, her roommate was not paying the rent, a situation many of us who have been young and had roommates can relate to. A few angry texts later, Cammy is convinced by her former roommate Heather to meet her at a different coffee shop. Cammy expresses that she doesn't have any money to hire a taxi, and so Heather convinces her to use a new rideshare service called Green for Life that's supposed to be very cheap. Cammy attempts to use this new rideshare service, and when the driver arrives, he is strangely pale, like most of us who work night shift are. However, he is very terse in his conversation, and Cammy thinks very little of it and of him, but doesn't have much of a choice. So she throws what she can of her life that was thrown onto the streets into the back of the car and prepares to meet with her roommate at the coffee shop. But along the way, she notices something is wrong. She's not familiar with the streets the man is taking and is fairly convinced he's going in the wrong direction. Cammy points this out to the driver, who tells her, "Oh no, this is a shortcut, and don't worry about it, and I know where I'm going," and all the things that a kidnapper would tell his soon-to-be victim. Once Cammy realizes where they're heading, it's a little bit too late, as the driver pulls off the main road, and Cammy soon finds herself surrounded by a bunch of other pale, clammy, and dead-looking individuals who promptly pull her out of the car. It's while she's being hoisted away by these individuals that a strange man appears and starts killing everyone in sight. It turns out that Cammy's driver was actually a vampire, and the people he brought her to were also vampires, and she was about to be their version of a Thanksgiving dinner. However, she is rescued by this dark stranger, who basically starts cutting off the heads and stabbing through the heart everyone around her with a half-wood, half-steel sword. After the slaughter is over, the gentleman addresses her very curtly, kisses her on the hand, and then proceeds to ignore her, talking on the phone with other gentlemen. Cammy, not like being ignored, decides to slip her phone into his pocket so she can follow him, because he will not address her any further. She slips her phone into his pocket so that she can track him, and using one of the little pay scooters that I personally find remarkably annoying, she follows the GPS signal to the individual's house, which just happens to be very far outside the city and very, very big. After knocking on a door of such prodigious size that she's not entirely sure it was heard, the gentleman opens the door and proceeds to not only throw her inside, but against a wall, a subject that will be brought up several times later. It turns out that this man is Dracula, and Dracula has been hired by the US government to hunt vampires. It's a rather involuntary hiring process, as many things with the government are. After a brief discussion, and Dracula figuring out that she's not actually a threat, he agrees to allow her to stay as his guest. And with Dracula, the term guest actually means something. But that is covered a bit more in depth in the book. Dracula, being the kind and gregarious man that he is, after throwing the lady into the wall, offers to give her a ride to work the next day, and slowly begins to educate Cammy on the various horrible, monstrous things that exist within the world, because Cammy is a bit of a masochist and can't understand she probably doesn't want to know these things and keeps asking questions. In fact, in the 3rd chapter, Dracula goes into great detail about the number of things that live on his property, and Cammy is generally off-put by these things, but for some strange reason, the poor naive girl can't seem to get it in her head that if she doesn't want to know, she shouldn't ask. But Dracula, being true to her word, not only provides her with breakfast, but provides her with a ride to work in a multi-million-dollar car because Cammy found it interesting. And this is where I start to get the feeling that Dracula might be partial to compliments about himself and the things that he owns. When they arrive at work, we get to meet Cammy's friend Brian, who is by far the thirstiest young man trying to be a police officer that I have ever seen in fiction. It is quite obvious from the beginning that Brian is very smitten with Cammy, and also that Brian finds Dracula to be a threat, because now this girl that he likes is staying with a man who is clearly extremely rich, in a very flashy car, and now seems to have nighttime access to the girl he thinks about in his dreams. The exchange is short-lived, and Cammy immediately runs into work, not really addressing Brian's concerns, which is a very 20-year-old girl thing to do. While at work, Cammy finds it a little bit difficult to deal with all the things she has been through recently, and it is very obvious to her coworkers, who point it out to their boss, who without hesitation tell her to go see a doctor and bring back a note, but get the hell out of my workplace. She has a very calm and concerned boss. Dracula, however, is not done with his day, and cannot simply return later to pick Cammy up, because Brian, our cop of thirst, decides that he's going to perform a routine stop on Dracula. And this is one of the things that really makes it hard for me to like Brian as a character. He is not only thirsty, but in this instance I feel he's kind of abusing his power. And I can understand it, but unfortunately I can't forgive it. Brian starts inspecting Dracula's car, and he notices that Dracula has a firearm in the front seat with him. Upon the usual police-style searches, Brian finds many, many, many other weapons in the car. And despite the fact that Dracula, who has previously told Brian that he was a doctor and worked for the FBI, Brian decides to arrest the man who has possession of the girl he so desperately wants to smooch. Dracula, however, doesn't make it easy. He basically passive-aggressively fights Brian the entire time, telling him it's a massive waste of his time not to do this, to call his supervisor, to check again if he is with the feds. And Brian, as pig-headed as only a man in his early 20s can be, ignores all of this and simply drags him into the station, leaving Dracula's Duesenberg, which I believe was the name of his multi-million-dollar car that he was driving, sitting on the side of the road. And though I am not a car man, I felt this in the depths of my soul. That poor, shiny, multi-million-dollar car sitting on the side of the interstate near Seattle. If he comes back and there's a frame left on cinder blocks, he would be a lucky, lucky man. So Dracula is hauled off to the police station, and everybody gets a nice little chuckle at his name. And while Brian is sitting there thinking of the promotion he's going to get from catching what he believes to be some very rich cosplayer who's violated multiple laws in Washington, his boss comes out screaming, "Why are the feds crawling up my butt over somebody arresting somebody named Dracula?" After Brian has served a very large helping of humble pie, and Dracula's effects are returned, he is forced to once again have another slice of humble pie as he is forced to take Dracula back to his car. However, Cammy has called and needs to be picked up because she was excused from work. And so Dracula, being the Chad that he is, simply informs Brian of this, makes him desperately uncomfortable, and tells him, "Hey, let's go pick up the girl you want to date and bring her back to my gigantic mansion." Cammy, however, is not having a good time. She decides since it's free, she's going to go to the college clinic at the school she attends, and the doctor is rather dismissive. "Oh, you are throwing up and you don't feel good? You must be pregnant. Stop being a whore and here, have some condoms," is basically the doctor's prescription. And while often I would say this is a rather based take from a doctor, she does seem almost abusively dismissive of the things Cammy has to say. But unfortunately, Cammy just can't make anything easy on herself. So there's a little bit of blame to go both ways here. After successfully picking Cammy up, Cammy decides it is time to include Brian in their look for Heather, her roommate who has gone walkabout. The first place they start is with Heather's parents, who it turns out they don't get along with her roommate. Mainly because Heather is, I'm guessing, a disappointment to the family, going out and doing drugs and hauling up with random junkies everywhere. While I can sympathize, I can't empathize with her parents, because this is rather early to have given up on your children, at least in my estimation. Dracula, after this, thanks Brian for helping them out, and after acquiring a new car, sends the little officer on his way. However, this was more due to Cammie's request because Cammie wants to go check out something else. Something that she's had a suspicion about. And this will bring you up to about the 40% point of the book. Now let's talk about one of my favorite topics, which is characters. And we're going to start with, sadly, my least favorite, which happens to be Cammie. And I want to make it clear here, I don't dislike Cammie in a way that's detrimental to the story. I think Cammie fits into the story very, very well. But as a person, I probably would find her rather insufferable. She's painfully naive. She's very soft. She doesn't seem to have had the necessary hardships in life, and that's despite having a mother who is borderline abusive and often beyond borderline abusive. She's also fairly bossy, and there are some parts of the book that lead me to believe that she might actually be crazy. I find her, as a character reading in a book, she is a good device to move the story along. If I were to meet her as a person, I would probably greatly dislike her. But the same can be true of any young, naive person who is a little bit too bossy for their own good. On the flip side of that, we have Dracula. And I do like Dracula as a character. I find him very, very funny. And he is very believable as somebody who has lived 700 years. He is not only very capable, but he is very unempathetic to people suffering. He has the mindset of get over it and make things happen. He does have a good sense of how priorities should go. Is when he's arguing with Cammie about his treatment of her, he does make the distinction that she is too soft and expecting to be coddled, basically. He also does feel very, very old, despite only looking like he's in his late 30s and early 40s. And he is stubborn to a fault. We'll come to Brian, who I like to call Officer Thirsty, because I get it. I understand him. I had a lot of similar notions in my late teens and early 20s, as I'm sure many guys have. He gives off that young male energy. He wants to be an alpha male so bad. And he would be so much better off if he could just calm down, chill out, and observe the situation for what it is. And I think his biggest problem in this is just that he sees Dracula as a threat to his love interest in Cammie. Which I get. Dracula is very wealthy. He's very well dressed. And Cammie's living at his house. In his situation, I could understand why he might be freaking out. But honestly, he would probably be in a better position if he would simply approach Cammie in a more romantic way. Then we come to another character I didn't mention in the storyline, and that's Malcolm. And Malcolm is he's Dracula's gopher. He's Dracula's man for hire, and he shows up a little bit at the beginning of the book. He's much more present in the middle to the end, so unfortunately I don't want to ruin too much of the story, so if you want to know, you'll have to go read for yourself. Now we come to my thoughts. One, I really like the interplay between Cammie and Dracula. Though I don't think I would like Cammie as a person, she makes a really good foil for Dracula. And there's this constant argument between the two about when they first met, did Dracula throw her into a wall or at a wall? And I'm going to quote Dracula here because he makes a very good point that if he had thrown her into a wall, she would probably be dead, which Cammie by the end of the book begins to appreciate. Then there is something that I know that the author is a little bit sensitive about, but I actually liked Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is where we got to meet the different things that lived on Dracula's property. He is going through and showing Cammie all the different things that live there and telling her what to watch out for, about half of which would kill her, and a few of which would do things that Cammie will not be quiet about, and the others who would at best ignore her. Now, there's a few things I didn't like, and as I've said before, most of it is Cammie. I don't like Cammie. She fits as a character, but as a person, I wouldn't like her. She's naive, she's a little ditzy, she's concerned about all the wrong things. Most of the things I complain about would be fixed with experience. But she's just a little bit... She's a bit of a snowflake, to be perfectly honest. By the end of the book, I feel she's becoming better. However, there's one more thing that I have to mention, and it is a bit of a petty thing. I'm not the biggest fan of Cammie's friends. And I don't mean that she shouldn't have friends. They feel a bit unnecessary. It is possible in later books they're going to play a bigger role in the story, but they feel a bit superfluous. And I'm probably the last person to talk about putting unnecessary things into a story, but for me, they were probably the lowest point of the book, but that's not saying much. The story was actually very fun, it was quick, it was punchy, and there really isn't much to complain about. These are the smallest of nits to pick. Now, some things that I would like to see, because I know the series is going to continue, I would really like to see more monster hunting. As a rule, I would not argue with this author on the supernatural or on history, which are two subjects that I really like, and two subjects she seems to be far, far more proficient in than myself. And when I say she is proficient in history, she's quoting off things that I only know on a surface level. And I feel that she did a very, very good job in representing someone who has lived for 700 years. I would also like to see Brian get on the vampire hunting. I feel he would be a really good asset. I think it would do wonders for his self-confidence and give him an excuse to be closer to Cammie. And this is coming from a guy who's a little bit older. I would personally find her a bit insufferable. I know she's supposed to be a very cute girl, and that she would be conventionally attractive, but she is such a whiner. And I agree with Dracula on this point. She is a sissy and a crybaby. Another thing I'd like to see, but this is just my personal taste, I know not everybody likes this, I want to see more interplay between the different factions. We get hints that there are other occult groups out there, that there are secret societies of monsters. There's all sorts of different things out there, and I really, really, really would like to see that explored more, because I think it would be very interesting. But again, that might not be the direction this book series takes, and I am always welcoming of new surprises. And now that I have said all I have to say, I would like to thank you all for listening, and wish you all good luck. Thank you for listening to my review. If you have any books that you would like to hear my take on, please leave them in the description. I do tend to favor indie authors over conventionally published, but I will read whatever I find interesting or whatever captures my fancy. If you would like to read, review, or criticize my own works, I will include a link in the description. Also, please keep the comments civil in the comments section. Also, if you enjoy what I do, please consider giving this video a like, sharing my work, or subscribing to my channel. Thank you.